I'm Vladimir Duthiers, and we are in the CBS This Morning Toyota Green Room with New York Times book review staff editor Lauren Christensen. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
She is here to share with us some of her top summer reading recommendations. I've got them right here. So, Lauren, it's summer. People want to hang out at the beach. They want to, forget about all the troubles, about all the things that they're reading in the news, and they want a good read. So let's start with some fiction books.
Okay.
First one. And it's great that the title of this book is just perfect. My Year of Rest and Relaxation.
It may be a bit misleading.
I know, because the cover art is very different.
Right. I mean, there's some irony in the title. It's probably not to be surprising. But Ottessa Moshfegh, she's the author of Eileen of a couple years ago.
Yep.
She also wrote a story collection called Homesick for Another World. This is her newest book, My Year of Rest and Relaxation. It's a funny, but darkly funny look at, female depression. And this woman who, she's young, it's the year 2000, she graduated from a top university and she's living in New York, and she wants to sort of numb herself to the difficulties that she's faced in her life. However you want to describe these difficulties. She has lived a life of privilege. She's image conscious. And so, whether or not she's really sympathetic is up to the reader to decide. But it's a wonderful portrait that has sort of a long lineage going back to even, Sylvia Plath, looking at, the history of female sort of neurotic, disordered thinking and psychological discomfort. It's a wonderful book.
So in this age where, we men are trying to understand better the difficulties, the challenges that some women have in this day and age, is this a good book for guys to read to get a little insight into the female psyche?
Absolutely.
If they can
ride it out, absolutely.
And I will say, why?
Well, it's dark.
Okay.
And it's very intense, and Ottessa's descriptions of sort of the female psyche can cut really deep. I will say, though, she has a psychopharmacologist who's prescribing her a lot of these sleep medications, and Dr. Tuttle is her name. She is one of the funniest fictional characters I have read in years. Hilarious.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people will recognize sort of the satire in sort of our over-prescribed society. So men and women will relate.
Okay, cool. So I'm putting this one on this side here.
Nice hot pink cover.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So next on the list, Convenience Store Woman.
Yes, so I picked this one as just a sort of personal favorite. I just took my first trip to Japan and have been absolutely obsessed with Japanese culture ever since.
For people who watch me on CBS This Morning, I am a huge Japan file.
Well, then you will love this.
Really?
It's by Sayaka Murata. She's a very well-known novelist in Japan, but this is her first book that's been translated into English, so sort of bringing her over to the Western world. It's the prose is as sort of crisp as is the sort of whole aesthetic of the country that I found, in the architecture, in the food, and it evoked everything I felt when I was in the country. But what's interesting, so it's about a young woman who works at a convenience store, no surprise, and she works there for, I think, about 20 years, and she pours her life into this convenience store. And it becomes so much part of her identity, and she doesn't have any aspirations beyond it. She doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want to have a career beyond just shelving and things like that. And I think what's so interesting is that Japanese culture is so much about expectations and propriety and, the order of things. And everyone in this woman's life is saying, why don't you want to make more of yourself? Well, how can you be happy? And she's sort of saying, well, why does my happiness threaten everyone else?
Right.
Why can't I just live according to what makes me happy? And I think that's such a universal concept.
Because a lot of people struggle to understand the fascination with Japanese culture. I was just talking to a colleague just this week about the fact that everything is orderly,
Yes.
that if reserve,
Yep.
that, when it says on the subway, don't use your phone, people don't use your phones, Whereas here in this country, we're more individualistic, and we take umbrage to people telling us what to do. And in Japan, it's not so. So I wonder, was this book first written in Japanese? Or
Yes.
So that's going to be interesting, I think.
Yes, it was translated. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's so interesting is, she does live a life that's pretty reserved and secluded, but other people are imposing their expectations onto her, and she's sort of saying, can you just let me be? And I just, it really...
All right, like Lauren, I'm putting that one to the side too. Okay, let's go to Warlight.
So a much more well-known author, Michael Ondaatje. He was the author of The English Patient.
I love that book.
Oscar-winning movie, et cetera, et cetera.
The movie was,
Well, his newest book, called Warlight, is set in London, immediately following World War II, and it's about a young family, 2 teenage kids whose parents have to leave them behind in London to go. The father gets a job opportunity in Singapore, so they leave them behind in the care of these, 2 men of very suspicious intent and background. There's, all kinds of adventure that I will not give away, but involving sort of kidnapping plots and things like that.
Wow.
Meanwhile,
so it's like a thriller?
I wouldn't call it a thriller, but you're definitely in suspense.
Okay.
And it's his typical sort of moody, atmospheric.
Yes.
You're unsure of yourself, but the pace isn't so heart racing.
Okay.
But it's definitely keeps you going. And then meantime, you find out that the mother actually never went to Singapore, and she's become involved in sort of some post-war intelligence work.
Plot twist.
Yes, absolutely.
Alrighty.
I leave it there, but it's, hit Duthiers at his finest.
Yeah.
For sure. It's not, I wouldn't call it a beach read, but it's definitely, a literary, exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, The English Patient it took me a long time to get through it. This doesn't look as...
If you're into historical fiction, this would be...
That's why, because I do. I'm
Yeah.
a huge historical fiction
Yeah.
fan. Putting it over here. All right, moving on to Give Me Your Hand by Megan Abbott.
This is the one that has not yet come. It will be on sale next week.
Okay.
It is the latest thriller from Megan Abbott. If you are into, Girl on the Train, all kinds of psychological fiction thrillers, this is the pick.
Girl on the Train, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's a twisted portrait of female friendship. 2 young girls meet in a chemistry class in high school and become extremely, enwrapped in each other's lives, but they're also intensely competitive. Fast forward 20 years later, the narrator is working in a lab, studying a very rare but very dangerous hormonal disorder that only affects women.
Okay.
She's working in a scientific chemistry lab, and in walks her friend from years ago who has shared with her a very dark secret that you only learn at the very end.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. These are I'm usually very picky about these books, but you're really selling them. Okay.
Moving to nonfiction.
Yes, nonfiction, The Terrible.
Yes. Ursa Daly Ward is a very well-known Instagram poet right now,
Yes.
which is sort of a new phenomenon that's really taking the literary world as well. So she has written her first memoir, and it's called The Terrible, and it's written so much of it. There is prose, but there's a lot of sort of poetry as well, and I think that's such an interesting way to tell your own life story. It starts sort of in North England, where she was raised, and goes through her life as a model. So
because she's like half Jamaican, half Nigerian.
Exactly.
Right? And I was based in Nigeria for many years, and she was known there. Does she talk a little bit about her Nigerian ancestry, or?
As a way to understand sort of her insecurities as a child with her image consciousness and trying to navigate, this world in which she looks so different from everyone else in ways that are positive and negative. I mean, she's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
She's very insecure about sort of her role in life, and it leads to sort of drugs and alcohol and her modeling career. And but it's an ultimately uplifting ending. I just think it's a literally poetic look at someone.
Well, I think it's interesting too. I think for a lot of people like myself, growing up multiracial, you struggle to understand. Somebody today recently asked me if I speak Thai, and I'm like, because I look like I'm Thai. Like people have been accusing me of being different cultures my entire life. They've asked me if I'm Algerian, if I speak Arabic, if I speak Spanish. No, right? But when you grow up in a world where people try to box you into a certain category, it can be sort of debilitating as a young person.
Absolutely, especially when you're a model and your whole career.
I'm not stunning. Like she.
Oh, I wouldn't say that, but especially when
Lauren.
your whole career is built on people staring at you,
right.
and using you as just this indicator to sell things or things.
Yeah.
So it's a.
All right, I'm putting that over here too. Yeah. All right, David Sedaris, you can never go wrong with
Right,
Sedaris.
Exactly. So very well-known essayist, humorist. His latest book, Calypso.
Yeah.
You may have read Me Talk Pretty One Day or Let's Explore Diabetes with Owls. He's sort of in later midlife, I would say. He's now in his 60s, and it's basically it's really all about. Most of it is set in this beach house he buys with his partner in North Carolina. He gathers his whole family together of sort of oddball cast, including his sister.
His sister, I was going to say, is his sister in it? Yeah, okay.
She's absolutely hysterical in here, as always. But aside from the humor, or along with the humor,
I love the cover.
I know.
I love the cover.
I know.
It's awesome.
Mixed in with the humor is, a really sobering portrait of a man who has lost his mother. And she was an alcoholic, and sort of grappling with that, as well as his sister to suicide. And there's a really poignant moment of the last moment that he saw her, that you can tell he really deeply regrets how he behaved towards her. And it's attacked head on, but you can still tell that Sedaris hasn't fully reconciled with it, as no one should be able to.
Right.
But it's so honest in its humor and its sobriety. And there's a particularly hysterical moment where he's actually feeding a tumor that has been removed from his body, a benign tumor, to a turtle on a beach. And that's all I'm going to say. So there's really...
The entire room
is
like laughing
at
at
here.
that.
It's
That's
really... There's something for
Tony,
everyone
what do you
in here.
think? Our stage director is like...
You don't want to read that. I don't know.
Tony gives a thumbs down
Yeah.
from Tony.
Beach read, for sure.
All right, cool. You can't go wrong with Sedaris. This one I'm also really intrigued by.
Yep.
How to Change Your Mind.
Right. So Michael Pollan,
Yes.
the author of Food Rules and Omnivore's Dilemma, very celebrated food writer, has taken a slight turn toward from food and diet to psychedelics.
Yeah.
So and he I think he's self-described in this book square. Right?
Yeah.
He'd never done any drugs before. He was not sort of in the Ken Kesey generation, or he was, but he didn't take part in it. But he has dropped acid for the first time, done several kinds of psychedelics, and writes so convincingly in this book.
That you might read this and want to drop acid.
Or that you understand it better and you see it beyond, maybe, but you see it beyond.
Right? I mean.
But you see it beyond the stigmas that we have attached to
What
it.
is the stigma with dropping acid? I mean, everybody, if you, no, I don't mean, I mean like, I mean that it was in the 60s, it was sort of considered like not a thing to do, but I think people, as they started to understand that there were some even medical benefits, and it was used by psychiatrists, right? So,
I mean, and the other thing is that microdosing has become sort of in vogue recently with Aiel Waldman's A Really Good Day is a book that came out, I think, a year or two ago about taking microdoses of LSD to treat very common psychological disorders, like instead of antidepressant medication. This is very different. This is not microdosing. This is macrodosing. This is taking enough quantities of the drugs to actually feel the effects and trip. And
is it just a description of what happens to you once you take these psychedelics?
Not at all. It's
or is
also,
it like the Omnivore's Dilemma? I mean, there's guidance in those books.
There is guidance. There's also a lot of history. There's social history. It's a phenomenon that goes way back. He starts with the 1930s when it was first sort of accidentally discovered from fungus and the whole mushrooms thing. And it takes you along. So even if you would never touch a drug in your life, this book, it's also...
Are mushrooms a drug?
Stay tuned. No, I mean, I think what's so interesting is that I think the title says so much more. Whether you are interested in psychedelics or not, it's a portrait of a man who's changing his mind. It's uprooting our very deep-seated associations and expectations and judgments and saying, well, what if I step outside my comfort zone for a second? Look at what could happen. And he also says that psychedelics, I mean, one of the assumptions is that it's very bad for you or addictive. He says it's not even as bad for you as like Diet Dr. Pepper, right?
Really?
I mean,
all right, yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but
you've heard him say
it's
that.
It's a really convincing and well-written.
Well, so books are my drug, so I think that I'm going to, like, a book like this is for people who want to step out of their comfort zone and perhaps have their attitudes changed
100%.
About drugs and about psychedelics in general, because you may come to a book like this with some very, like, sort of narrow views on what
it's
they
a
are.
very authoritative man who's changed his mind.
So he doesn't say at the end that you should take.
I don't think he's legally allowed to. There is a disclaimer in the beginning that's
that's
sort
so
of like,
funny.
yeah.
This only happened to me.
Right. Don't try this at home.
Yeah, don't try this at home. All right, so this is just an enormous amount of like really quality books that you've bought for us here. And I feel like I need to read all of them, and so I'm going to keep them. I'm looking at Jackie, our books producer.
We can book club them whenever you're done.
Yes. Are you in a book? How many book clubs are you in?
I'm not in any book clubs. My job is a book club.
I know, but still, like, you wouldn't your friends like actually?
I don't think they want me in the book club. is the real thing. Yeah.
You might just have to have like an email book club.
Right.
I'll send you the books that I'm reading, and you'll say,
Right.
you don't cover graphic
My friends
novels.
are like, you're not invited.
You don't do, I don't do comic books, Vlad.
Right.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for
This was
having me.
great.
Happy reading.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about these books, there's nothing on the prompter. So I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying anything else, but it's been, we just say bye-bye. Everyone in the room is like, just say bye-bye. Say bye-bye, Lauren.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.